The first gunshots echoed through the jungle just before sunset. People screamed. Some ran, others froze in shock. A small aircraft sat on a rough dirt airstrip, surrounded by dense Guyanese rainforest. Moments earlier, several men had stepped out from a tractor pulling a trailer. Now they were opening fire on a group of visitors preparing to leave. When the shooting stopped, 5 people lay dead, including a United States congressman. Back in Jonestown, nearly 6 miles away, hundreds of men, women, and children had no idea that history was about to take a horrifying turn. Within hours, more than 900 of them would be dead. This is the story of the final 24 hours inside Jonestown. And it began with a visit that Jim Jones desperately did not want. By November 1978, Jonestown had existed for just over a year. Officially known as the People's Temple Agricultural Project, it sat deep in the jungles of Guyana, a small English-speaking nation on the northern coast of South America. To outsiders, it was advertised as a socialist paradise. The settlement contained cottages, gardens, workshops, a school, medical facilities, and communal dining areas. Temple members worked long hours clearing jungle, growing crops, and maintaining the settlement. Many residents had traveled thousands of miles from California believing they were helping build a better society. For some, Jonestown represented hope. For others, it had become a prison. Behind the public image, conditions were deteriorating. Residents often worked exhausting schedules in tropical heat. Food was limited. Armed security guards patrolled the compound. Loudspeakers broadcast Jim Jones's voice day and night. Jones himself was changing. Years of drug abuse, paranoia, and increasing isolation had transformed the charismatic preacher who once preached racial equality and social justice. He had become obsessed with enemies. He believed governments, journalists, defectors, and intelligence agencies were all conspiring against him. More importantly, he had convinced many of his followers to believe the same thing, but the outside world was beginning to pay attention. Former members who had escaped described beatings, intimidation, forced labor, and psychological manipulation. Concerned relatives formed groups demanding investigations. One of those concerns eventually reached the office of Congressman Leo Ryan. Ryan was known for personally investigating issues rather than relying solely on reports. When worried family members approached him about relatives trapped in Jonestown, he decided to see the settlement for himself. In mid-November 1978, Ryan arrived in Guyana with a small delegation that included journalists, government officials, and concerned family members. The visit immediately made Jim Jones nervous. At first, Jonestown appeared welcoming. Residents greeted visitors with smiles. A musical performance was organized. People danced, children sang. The atmosphere seemed cheerful. To many observers, it looked like a thriving community. But beneath the surface, cracks quickly began to appear. Several residents secretly approached members of Ryan's delegation. Some passed handwritten notes, others quietly whispered their requests. The messages carried the same desperate plea. They wanted to leave. One note simply read, "Please help us get out." The discovery confirmed the worst fears of critics. Not everyone in Jonestown was there willingly. As word spread that some residents wished to leave, tension rippled through the settlement. Jones understood the danger. If people left and spoke openly, they could expose what was happening inside the compound. The next day, more residents stepped forward. By now, dozens wanted to leave with Ryan's group. The situation was slipping out of Jones's control. Then things became even worse. During the visit, a loyal Jones supporter suddenly attacked Congressman Ryan with a knife. The attack failed, but the message was clear. The situation was becoming dangerous. Ryan decided it was time to leave. Those wishing to defect gathered their belongings and prepared for departure. On the afternoon of November 18, they traveled toward the Port Kaituma airstrip. The atmosphere was tense. People were frightened. Nobody knew whether they would be allowed to leave peacefully. Back in Jonestown, Jones faced the crisis he had feared for years. Members were leaving. A congressman had witnessed unrest. Journalists were documenting everything. The outside world would soon hear stories from defectors. His isolated kingdom was beginning to collapse. Then came the event that pushed everything over the edge. As passengers boarded aircraft at Port Kaituma, a trailer pulled by a tractor approached the airstrip. Several armed temple members climbed out. Without warning, they opened fire. Bullets ripped across the runway. People dove for cover. Journalists fell. Passengers scrambled beneath aircraft. The attack lasted only moments. Its consequences would last forever. Congressman Leo Ryan was killed. 3 journalists were killed. 1 defector was also murdered. Several others were wounded. It was the first time in American history that a sitting congressman had been assassinated while performing official duties. News of the attack quickly made its way back to Jonestown. Jim Jones understood exactly what it meant. There was no going back now. The murders guaranteed an international response. Police investigations would follow. Military forces might arrive. His movement faced destruction. What happened next remains one of the most chilling recorded events in modern history. That evening, residents were ordered to gather inside the pavilion. The large open-air structure served as the community's central meeting area. Hundreds assembled beneath its roof. Children sat beside parents. Elderly members occupied benches. Others stood in the tropical darkness. The jungle around them buzzed with insects. Generators hummed. Floodlights illuminated faces filled with fear and confusion. Then, Jim Jones began speaking. Fortunately for historians, much of what happened was recorded on an audio tape later recovered from the site. Known today as the death tape, it provides a disturbing glimpse into the final hours. Jones informed the community about the airstrip shootings. He claimed hostile forces would soon invade. He warned of torture, imprisonment, and suffering. According to Jones, death was preferable to capture. Again and again, he referred to the act as revolutionary suicide. Some members appeared to agree, others did not. The tape reveals moments of hesitation and dissent. One woman, Christine Miller, openly questioned the plan. She argued there might still be alternatives. Perhaps they could flee. Perhaps they could negotiate. Perhaps they could survive. Her objections stand out because so few dared challenge Jones publicly. For a brief moment, another future seemed possible, but Jones repeatedly dismissed her concerns. Supporters shouted her down. The crowd gradually moved toward acceptance. Fear had become more powerful than hope. Outside the pavilion, preparations were already underway. Large containers held a mixture of grape-flavored drink, sedatives, and cyanide. Contrary to popular belief, it was not Kool-Aid, but a similar product called Flavor Aid. The distinction is minor compared to the horror of what followed. Children were among the first victims. Parents carried infants forward. Poison was administered using syringes and cups. Some children cried. Others were too young to understand what was happening. As the poison took effect, many began collapsing. Witnesses who survived later described hearing screams, confusion, and panic. For parents, the nightmare was unimaginable. Many watched their children die before taking the poison themselves. Some likely complied willingly, others almost certainly did not. Historians continue debating exactly how much choice individuals truly had. Armed guards surrounded the area. Escape routes were limited. The settlement was isolated by miles of jungle. What is beyond dispute is that the atmosphere was dominated by fear, pressure, and overwhelming control. One by one, entire families died together. The sounds gradually changed. The crying faded. Conversations stopped. Movement slowed. Bodies covered the ground around the pavilion. The tropical night grew quieter. By the time authorities arrived the following day, the scene was almost beyond comprehension. Hundreds of bodies lay side by side. Adults, children, grandparents, entire families. The final death toll reached 918 people. More than 300 were children. It remains one of the largest losses of American civilian life in a non-natural disaster. Before the attacks of the 11th of September 2001, the world struggled to understand what had happened. How could so many people follow one man to such a tragic end? The answer is far more complicated than many assume. The residents of Jonestown were not simply gullible or irrational. Many were idealistic people searching for purpose, equality, community, and belonging. What began as a movement promising hope gradually evolved into something darker. Isolation replaced independence. Loyalty replaced critical thinking. Fear replaced trust. And one leader's growing paranoia ultimately consumed an entire community. Today, nearly half a century later, Jonestown remains a warning. It reminds us how powerful charismatic leaders can become when unchecked. It shows how manipulation often happens slowly, not suddenly. Most importantly, it reveals how ordinary people can be drawn into extraordinary tragedies when hope, fear, and absolute authority collide. On the evening of the 18th of November, 1978, the jungle of Guyana grew silent. The voices that once filled Jonestown disappeared. The dream of paradise was over. What remained was one of history's most haunting lessons about power, belief, and the devastating consequences of surrendering both to a single man.